seconds. 27.
26.
25 seconds.
24. 23.
22 seconds.
21 seconds.
20 seconds. 19.
18.
17 seconds.
16.
15 seconds.
14.
13 seconds.
12. 11.
10 seconds. 9.
8.
7.
6.
6 points.
Copy.
5 seconds.
3. 2. 1.
Hi folks, welcome back to the Scotch Tracker. Today we'll be discussing the second episode of the second season of Lower Decks, which is called Kayshon, His Eyes Open. I'm joined today by Gary Cannon as co-host. Thanks for joining the discussion, Gary.
My pleasure.
So what did you think of this episode?
I enjoyed it, and it was nice to think that I enjoyed it without reservation. The first episode of this season, I had a few question marks, like, are they really going in this direction? But in this case, I thought they did a very fine job. It was good Star Trek, and it was good comedy, and it was even good action. What about you?
Well, I think like the first watch through I did, I think there was so much so much to take in. I found that quite difficult, and especially with like the sort of lack of, I think there was like a lack of continuity with the previous episode, where like I was expecting it to go on to like, this is now after the Titan goes through the anomaly, what happens to the Titan, but it didn't really, like, suddenly in this episode, like, the Titan's safe again, and you're like, how did it, at least I was like, how did it get back to there? But then in the very first scene, they talk quite a bit about wormholes, so like my headcanon was like, maybe like the Cerritos rescued the Titan, and you just don't see that between the episodes.
I think that if that happened, we would have seen some way in which Mariner is lording it over Boimler when he returns.
Oh, at the end of this episode, you mean?
Yeah, at the end of this. There would have been a mention of it. But I love the way that you think. That's a great way to do it.
Is there a way you might explain like how sort of escaped or got out of the anomaly? Did it just come through the other side? Or?
The Titan is like the Enterprise, right? It's like one notch underneath the flagship. And I figured that the crew of the Titan is one of those hotshot folks, and they can get themselves out of anything, just like the Enterprise D always does. And it kind of reinforces to me in a way that this show, Lower Decks, is about, its central idea is about those four characters and not about the sci-fi drama. The sci-fi drama is the background that these writers are painting their character stories.
Cool. Well, I like the way you think about it as well.
What I like is that neither of our ways is inherently right or wrong. They're complementary too.
Yeah, I was thinking recently, it's like, whether you enjoy like Lower Decks or to whichever degree you do, I guess, it's, you know, it's all subjective. That's the thing about like art. I was thinking like it's all subjective, so there's no right or wrong answer really. It's just like, as long as you're respectful about it, I guess.
Right. I've been in several conversations, some of them with you, some without you, elsewhere, and it's been interesting to see how many people are finding Lower Decks not to be of their taste, and how many are very much so. But unlike similar disagreements in, say, the 1990s, when some people just hated DS9, and they said, "Oh, it's not Star Trek. They're not exploring. They're just in a station." Somehow, Star Trek fandom has evolved over these decades to the point where now we can acknowledge the divergence among ourselves more respectfully than ever before. That said, I still can't stand the 3 Kelvin Universe movies, and don't try to convince me otherwise. So I can be hard-headed too.
Well, it seemed to me like with Star Trek, I think in general, even though I guess it's we're going off to a little bit of a tangent or whatever. It seems like when a new show comes out, people can be quite like up in arms about, like, even back to like the days of TNG, Next Generation, but then like as it goes on, or I think it's maybe a mix of as it goes on and after the fact, like people warm to it. Because like I remembered like Enterprise being quite like that. Like at the time, I felt like there was quite a bit of opposition among the fan community to Enterprise. But then, like since then, I've been surprised by, like, on the internet and on Facebook and stuff, people saying like they really like that. I guess we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
Going back to Lower Decks, were there any like particular parts of this episode you found like especially funny?
Oh, you asked me that as the first question last time too, and I should have been prepared for it this time. And while I think about it, though, I think your video may have frozen. Oh, now you're moving again. Okay.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Now
Sorry
you're
about
moving.
that, folks.
Particularly funny. I should have been prepared. Particularly funny. I did. I will vote for, and as with last week, my opinion may change over the course of our conversation. But at this moment, I will plump for the exchange. Aren't they the ones who tried to collect data? Response: they all tried to collect data. I thought that was appropriate. Yeah, I mean, it was, and partly because it calls back from the Next Generation, and that's why I love that episode where Data is the most toys, where he's nearly collected, or is temporarily collected. Maybe that's the way to put it. How appropriate too that yesterday's episode of What If, the Marvel animated show, also involves the character called the Collector. I thought that a wonderful coincidence that they both came out on the same day. Anyway, there's another tangent. Sorry.
Well, I noticed sort of like the reference. I thought like it was referencing Kiva's Faggio in The Most Toys with this episode of Lower Decks. But then recently, I've also realized that the new Star Trek Picard novel also references the same character, and it's just come out like this past week. So I thought
this new Colonel, the Colonel,
interesting,
whatever his name, or specifically Kivas Faggio.
Kivas Faggio.
Okay.
I thought that was interesting. Like two Star Trek products released about the same time, both referencing that character, and I thought, like, if there's a time for the most toys to sort of go viral, it's probably like now.
See, now I want to, knowing that, I want to rewatch that episode, which is perhaps one of the great things about Lower Decks, is it constantly makes me want to watch other ones. For example, the large skeleton hanging from the Collector's Collection with an old style blue uniform of Starfleet. And I think, is that the giant Spock from that animated series episode? And I mean, that's my current thinking. And now I want to go watch that episode of the animated series. And it's not every day that I feel the motivation to watch an episode of the animated Star Trek, the animated series.
I quite like that episode of The Infinite Falcon.
Yeah.
Written by Walter Koenig.
Is that, yeah, he wrote one or two, right? I didn't realize that was one of them.
He wrote one.
Okay.
And it was that one. And I guess they've already referenced that particular episode during the first season of Lower Decks as well. I personally, I quite liked the line. I thought it was quite funny when Tandy presents the puppet of Kayshon and says, "Kayshon, when he became a puppet."
Yeah, I concur. That's also worthy.
But I thought there was quite a few lines that were quite funny. One about Stevens keeping a log about his mustache.
A log for his mustache, yeah.
Yeah. What did you think about like the pre-credit scene in general?
I suspect that it will create a slight bit of controversy, but I don't particularly have a problem with it. I've never served in the military, so I'm don't know how their And Starfleet, of course, is a kind of is imagined based on a modern day military background. And so as far as yeah, to an extent, right. So as far as they're sleeping in the corridors or having the communal sonic shower. I don't know how that would work in a practical terms. It surprised me, so I said, "Oh, it must be a military thing." I was impressed with how the animators handled the notion of character nudity by basically saying they're in a sonic shower, so everything is blurred because it's a sonic shower. And I thought that was a really clever way to be respectful of the characters' bodies, essentially, while still fitting that within the storyline. So I thought it was a clever way to go about it.
Cool.
I like the notion of there being multiple levels in the sonic shower. That was clever. Never thought of that.
I had quite a few thoughts about the pre-credits scene. I thought that it included like a lot of information, especially at first when like Tandy's talking about the wormhole, and it like led me to question like, is it just like black holes that have event horizons? So I looked that up and I realized saw that wormholes technically got 2 event horizons.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
And there are a few different entities or situations in Voyager, anomalies that they've encountered that they talk about how they're approaching the event horizon. I think the second, or I guess it's the third technically, episode, where in the where B'Elanna gets her promotion to chief engineer. I think that anomaly has an event horizon, and there are others.
Yeah. Apparently, like the wormhole is like a black event horizon or something like that, and as well as a white one or something.
I wonder if that's just if it's a unidirectional wormhole, or if it's two within. Anyway, wow, cool.
So I thought also the scene was quite good for introducing the character Jet. Who like towers over Maddener, it seems like, and like the scene like left me questioning why sonic showers would have like such uncomfortably high settings. That's what I like initially questioned myself until I remembered that like modern day showers also have like uncomfortably high settings.
I see. Have you ever been in one of those showers in a hotel or something, and you turn it on and it just it peels your hair off just to stand in the thing. Yeah, I was happy to see Jet come back. We've seen him twice, I think, and I think there was some good potential with that. I like that with Jennifer in the first episode of the season, and now with Jet. I wonder, and with the psychiatrist, the bird psychiatrist, being the counselor sitting next to Freeman on the bridge, even. I like that we're going to see perhaps some of these characters who appeared once in the first season again, and see them fleshed out perhaps a bit more, like Jet just was.
I think I probably wiped much of the first season from memory.
Well, as I said, I watched it 5 times, including most recently was 2 weeks ago. So I'm working on long-term memory and short-term memory reinforced. But yeah, Jet, who was an old friend of Boimler's girlfriend, and then we also saw a holographic Jet, who's the one who I think he was the one who protected the holographic Captain Freeman from the chocolate chip cookies that Boimler was going to offer her. I think that was Jet.
What did you think of like the galleries on the collector ship?
I wanted to see more of them. I was so sad when they found a way out, because the writers and the animators were doing such a great job of coming up with the different things. I very look forward to Memory Alpha at some point. Must have we'll have a list of all the different things that can be seen from each camera angle in each of the different rooms. It's inevitable. It may be there already, and I just haven't checked yet. But yeah, I thought it was clever. I loved the army of flying attack Roombas, the vacuums that fly around. I thought that was a clever touch. But yeah, each thing felt good. In a way, it behaves a little like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. You go from one room into the next, and there's a challenge you have to face, and then into the next, and there's a different kind of challenge. That kind of sequentiality, that appeals to me. That type of storytelling. It can be overdone, but
I guess it's a bit like Move Along Home or something.
Yeah. You know, which I don't hate as much as most people do, but that's another matter.
All right.
Alan Moraine. Yeah.
So I enjoyed seeing like a salt vampire, or they used to call it M113 creature.
Yes.
Among the items, I thought it was pretty cool. But there's so many, like you say, there's so many like batliths and
the sex helmet of Kalis was a special highlight in the episode for me, because we constantly have these new things of Kalis show up: his sword and his shield and his Bible, etc. And the fact that there would be a sex helmet just is a wonderful and polite nudge of mockery that they always went back to this Kalis something or other thing. And I think that it was done respectfully, and I liked it, the idea.
And I seem to recall that Tukufma in Discovery Season 1 referenced Kalis quite heavily.
Kalis is, yeah. Well, we've met Kalis in Next Generation, or the cloned version of Kalis, at least. So that's good.
Yeah, and then like by the time of DS9, he's like the Emperor, like full time basically. It seems like that to me.
And that wasn't that, I think that was a Next Generation episode where they and Worf was instrumental in that, in making, or in convincing this Kalis, even though it was a fake Kalis, to still become the Emperor, because that's what the Empire needs, and very Klingon, prideful honor kind of way.
Yeah. That also, like the gallery with like the glass sort of cages or whatever, sort of reminded me of the animated series episode How Sharper Than the Serpent's Tooth, which has also got like a similar area.
Good call. Wow.
Your
animated series. I'm really impressed. That's good.
Did you like the character of Chairman? How do you say his name? Siji, I think it might be.
Of
tentacles.
He's dead, so it doesn't matter if I like him or not. I mean, he was kind of a stereotype, but it worked fine. I kind of like the fact where he says, I don't want your people to have sticky appendages, because he doesn't have fingers; he has tentacles instead. So it was a nice linguistic. A bit of linguistic sophistry that I thought was appealing.
I thought in the comments, Jesse's brought up a good point. the helmet sort of makes logical sense.
That is an excellent point.
I think for me, like, I didn't really like the character of CG. I thought he seemed too much like a caricature, and seemed to like keep reminding me of a character in, I think it's Futurama, that looks quite similar, I think. And yeah, just like his species wasn't established and stuff like that. So there's not really much world building, I suppose, with his character.
It's possible that we will meet his species again. Or at the very least, see them in a background at Quark's bar at some point. These species, along these lines, the species that I'm interested in seeing more of is the people of Riker's first officer, and I think that's a very elegant look. And yes, it's another species that's clearly just a human in makeup and a wig. but still, it's kind of a pretty cool makeup and wig. So I'd like to learn more about that species.
Yeah, cool. So what did you think of the introduction of Kayshon?
It made me very happy. I mean, one of the disadvantages of Next Generation is that they hadn't yet developed this deep a respect for the new canon, the new continuity they were creating yet. And so we never saw the Tamarians again, the children of Tamar. I still like to call them that because that's a more, metaphorical name. So it was wonderful to see that species come back. The notion that the universal translator struggles still with the Tamarian language was charming, and it was. It'll be interesting to see how the character continues as the security chief. But
I thought more it was to do with him actually, like struggling with the Federation language, because I think he says something like that when he's like first introduced.
In I think it's his second scene, he talks about, I'm still getting used to Federation standard, but the first, he does make a reference to the Universal Translator. Now I have to go back and listen again to see how it unfolded. Okay. It's nice to see a security chief who is pretty much the opposite of Shax in temperament. He's very kind and conciliatory, but still brave, right? He jumped to push him out of the way, so it'll be interesting to see what more we do with that character. I'm kind of sad to see the puppet go away, but that's all right.
Yeah, I thought, I think before he was introduced in this episode, I was like, how is he going to sum up compared to Worf? Because I think Worf was such an image of a tactical and security officer on a starship in TNG. I know he wasn't introduced like that. He was introduced at the con, I think. But I think eventually he ended up that way in TNG, and of course went on to be an ambassador even on Kronos by the end of DS9 and stuff like that. Even then, I was like, how is Kayshon going to compare to that? So in his very first scene, I thought it was cool and interesting that Worf, I think Worf and Klingons in general, they hold sort of the concept of honor so dear. So I thought it was pretty cool that Kayshon in his first scene says that it's an honor to join the bridge crew.
And certainly the Tamarians have, I think, a similar sense of honor and of dignity about their person and about how they handle things like combat. And even though we haven't seen much of them before this, just Captain Dathon almost exclusively, it's kind of like Klingon without the hubris. Without the being immediately prone to violence. I like, for example, that Starfleet is allowing Kayshon to modify his uniform by having a ceremonial dagger across his front. That was
again, he's wearing a sort of Worf-like sash across his front. Something crossed my mind there. I can't remember what I was going to say about that. But yeah, I think I thought his introduction was pretty cool. And also, I forgot to say, even though I found it frustrating, the first watch through, I then watched it 2 subsequent times, because the second time, I really thoroughly enjoyed the episode a lot more. Anyway, I liked, for example, the sense of conflict between Mariner and Jet. I thought that was a cool aspect of the episode. But then again, I thought that Kayshon's Tamarian references eventually got tiresome. I thought it was an interesting idea. I think especially before he was brought into the series or whatever, before you see him, that they would have a character like that. but I'm not really like hugely excited about seeing like how he's going to go on, and because I think they'll just maybe like continue to have him make references like those, and I'm like, how many times can you do that?
I hope they make new ones. I hope we get introduced to more of the Temerian language, because we did learn one or two new phrases. I won't remember right now what they were. But one of the things I really like about Lower Decks in general, which you've just inspired me to realize, is how we do get an opportunity to see species that were forgotten and maybe explore them a little. I can never remember the name of the cat species, the Dr. Cat.
No, Kayshon.
The Kayshon species, thank you. Or the species of Eryx in animated series with 3 arms and red. And now the Temerians, and even another had come across my mind, and now I've forgotten what it was. It's nice to see, for example, an Andorian at this point in the story. There were no Andorians in Voyager or DS9 or Next Generation, so and this show falls right after them. So we're seeing an Andorian for the first time in a long time. There were
some
in the story. Were there like background appearances?
Well, like I remember, I always remember, like Data's daughter Lal considered being an Andorian, or at least an Andorian appears when she was like, "What species will I be?"
Right. I can't remember though another actual Andorian character.
Yeah, I don't.
It's nice to see another Trill. We haven't seen a Trill since Dax, really, and have a Trill on the bridge is kind of fun.
There are in the TNG films on the bridge.
Are there Trill on? Oh, right.
Women, yeah.
And of course we have Trill in Discovery, but I that's earlier in a chronology.
Yeah.
You know, the chronology of storytelling versus the chronology of the story is all a nomenclatural nightmare.
And Andorians in Discovery as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to be proven wrong. This is good.
I like how they're fleshing out the different species. I was just thinking, like, you know, in regard to like my frustration over how many times can they reference like Temerian dialogue with Kayshon, I was like, what would make it like interesting for them if they did with his character? And I think like if he returned to like his homeworld, I think that might be interesting to see more of the Temerian culture. I think that would be interesting. A bit like you're saying, like fleshing out the different species.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea. I love that.
Cool. I thought it was funny when like Boimler reads aloud while he was writing down like everything, literally everything during the briefing.
I've been that person in a meeting. I remember one meeting taking minutes that were so good they ended up being like 9 pages, and somebody said these are the best minutes ever, and somebody else said they're supposed to be minutes, not hours. So I felt Boimler's pain. Boimler's one of the 2 characters in Star Trek that I'm most similar to, not necessarily that I identify with, but I acknowledge my similarity to. So when he does really stupid stuff like that, I feel his pain.
Do you think like after that scene he would have gone like, oh, oops, like I shouldn't have written it down?
I don't think he would. I don't think Bradward Boimler would, but I think that William Boimler would. It's nice to see Riker as captain in conference room setting, for example, and elsewhere. His style of working with his crew is different. It's his own. It's good. It works.
I think with Riker, like sort of before now, his depictions in the last 2 episodes basically have like frustrated me, but I think it's because he's been like so much like a sideline character, and even then, like I thought, like with, as I said last time, I guess, the fact that it seemed like they kept on bringing him back for like season finales, but I think in this episode, because he's got like more to do, that wasn't an issue for me. Like I enjoyed his portrayal in this character a lot more because he had a lot more of the story to play with.
Yeah, I really like what they're doing with him, and this episode is when we really get to see that. I was one of those people when in Next Generation, it was constantly said, "Oh, Riker, you'd be a great captain someday," or he's been offered 6 different commands and these kinds of things. And I always thought, I don't think I'd want to serve under Riker. But now I'm able to see him in that capacity with more respect than I had imagined it before. I like how they turned Riker into a captain.
I thought it was cool that you got some like context in this episode that there's only a few cyborgs in Starfleet.
Oh.
And the automated defenses of the Collector, like, seem to basically come back to life as a hologram. Sort of reminded me of DS9 Civil Defense. It was like sort of quite a similar situation on Space Station Deep Space Nine, where it's the cat that's like the automated defense system, I think.
Which episode is that? I need to pull up the memory alpha and remind myself.
Civil Defense.
On Civil Defense. I have such a hard time remembering my things sometimes. But
I know, like, the automated defense aspect at least is similar, because the station's like.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. Cisco, Jake O'Brien are trapped in the chute, the coal chute area, and yes. Oh, that's a great episode. Okay, I have to remember its name now.
And then also like when the Collector guy, who I didn't write down his name. In
Colonel somebody.
Well, when his hologram appears, I think it's a hologram. He says like which like reminded me of I think his name's Ned. That appears in like Jurassic Park, where there's automated defense system comes online and says I
would not have caught that reference. That's wonderful. And that's the kind of thing that I suspect would be intentional among these writers. I mean, they know they know what they're doing. Wow.
So you talked earlier about like the hovering vacuums. The first time I saw them, like I thought it was quite funny. You know, like they're like, "What's it going to do? Suck us to death?" And it turns out it actually will. That sort of reminded me of the Daleks. I think there's a Rose or someone or a character like that. It's like, "What's it going to do? Suck us to death?" And then it turns out it does with the plunger. And I watched the episode like the second time through with my dad, and he noted that he was saying, "You'll be having nightmares after this," to me, because I've got like an automated like vacuum cleaner that's very similarly shaped to the flying ones in this episode.
Oh, I'm sure on a Roomba probably, and I'm certain I don't know if they market it with that name in the UK there. I'm certain that's an homage to that very device. The fact that so many of us, we have one, but it's in a box somewhere. We haven't used it in years. It's just floating around, automated, and where's it going to go? What's it going to do? Well, one of the things I liked about it is I used to have kind of an irrational fear of staple removers, because I would envision a staple remover just kind of constantly chomping at you in little bits, and that would be very painful, just like having this flying army of vacuums just sucking you out bit by bit. Oh, now I will have nightmares. Thanks a lot.
Sorry. What did you think of like the army, I guess, of Packlids? How do you think the Packlets were portrayed in this episode?
I think it was our conversation last week. You talked about the Packlets in a way, and and I tried to defend them, and I'm having difficulty defending my defense now. Yeah, I'm not as convinced of them. Now that said, if Riker's briefing is to be believed, the Packlets are just, for pun intended for this episode, they're just puppets for somebody else. So he's kind of hinting there's another big bad who I suspect the Cerritos will be involved in somehow. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have obfuscated so obviously in the writing in that scene. So I think if the Packlets turn out to be somebody's puppets, I'll believe them better. But something about their coarse brutality in this particular episode didn't fit with the old Packlet approach. Packlets are another great example of a species we didn't really get much about in the olden days, and now we're finally coming back to.
So, actually, I had like the opposite reaction.
This is great. We're both swans. And that's Star Trek, right? Why not? Okay.
So, I loved the dialogue this time. I thought it was like suitably, like super sounding, like matching like how they were portrayed in TNG. Basically,
Yeah.
I really liked how they're colloquially referred to as lads at one point.
Yes, that was interesting. There's a lead, we have to kill it, and it turns out to be snacks. Those miners are taking our snacks.
Yeah, I thought that double crossing was like an effective surprise.
Yeah.
You agree?
I do agree. Yes, I was surprised that the Packlets would think of it, but the Packlets are full of surprises right now. So.
And I loved like the world building with like Scalaby Bones returning from TOS. I can't remember the name of that particular episode at this time. Yeah, I can't remember. But yeah, I liked that they were brought back. And it's established that their bones can be broken down into acid. And then Tandy and Rutherford thinking up the escape plan, I thought might point to like them possibly like gaining more responsibility and stuff in the future. What do you think about that?
I certainly hope that's the case. I also like the subtle dig, very appropriate to our times culturally, of the two leader personalities fighting it out amongst each other, and meanwhile it's the two scientists in the back that actually solved everything. I wonder if they were thinking that in the writers' room. It's very much a comparison to our world today, but. Yeah, I'd love to see Tendi and Rutherford be more proactive. That said, I also like their personalities. So I wouldn't want the personalities to change, even if the actions end up changing. One of the moments I particularly love is probably still. I still don't remember the name. It's probably still my favorite Lower Decks episode. It's when they're all allegedly in trial and they have to tell this story of what happened to them on a particular stardate. And Tendi's story is wonderful, in which she just beats up all of these Romulans single-handedly. It's like, so there's more in Tendi's character than we're aware of, and I hope that those things come out every once in a while. But
yeah, I've noticed like a story on, or speculations online, like because she's had such a history in Starfleet, and they're like, is she like a time traveling alien or something like that? Like, yeah, I think there's certainly more that's to be established about her character.
Yeah. Yeah. And for that matter, with Rutherford also, we still don't know why he is a cyborg. What happened to him physically that made that necessary. and we don't know anything about Rutherford's upbringing or childhood or anything like that. We know a fair amount about Mariners, not much. I don't think much of Boimler either. And with Tendi, we just know that 5% of Orions are not pirates. Yeah, Tendi's wonderful.
Yeah, I really like her as well. Regarding Boimler, I really like the scene where he reminds like the others that Starfleet and by extension Star Trek, I guess, isn't like purely about action. I thought that was cool.
That yeah.
Which I've noticed, like some people have taken that to be like ammunition for saying like Lower Decks is sort of like dissing Discovery or some of the other Star Trek shows, modern Star Trek shows, because there's more action in them. I don't see it that way.
I don't think it's dissing them. It's just stating that there are also other things. It's great that there is more action-based Star Trek, and it's, but that's in the world. I mean, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that needs to be the only thing that exists in the world, in the Star Trek world.
Faith's asked if Tandy's the only Orion in Starfleet that we know of. Could you think of any others? I thought of in the sort of Kelvin timeline films. At Starfleet Academy and stuff like that.
I'm pulling up her things. I thought that we've mentioned. Oh, that's it. I see what's happening there. I thought that they had mentioned that at some point that she was the first, but
in the prime timeline.
In the prime timeline, like Tendi was in that. But I'm looking for specific references and not seeing anything about that. So again, I'm happy to be wrong. Interesting.
Is that Memory Alpha?
Yes.
Right.
I am on Memory Alpha so often. It's really silly.
This episode sort of reminded me of working on Memory Alpha, because there's a particular like really quick shot of the Enterprise E's transporter room in Star Trek Insurrection, and you see like the Titan's transporter room in this episode, and I thought it was really cool that it looks like exactly like the Enterprise E's transporter room.
Wonderful. Oh, that's great. I love that kind of stuff. And it shows, I mean, in a way, that is a sign of how much the writers of Lower Decks respect being part of Star Trek, and how they're not just a parody, and they're not just making fun of all of it, but they see the show as integral to the canon, integral to the overall story that Star Trek is telling. Yeah, that's great, and therefore I don't think it feasible that the writers would be dissing Discovery or Picard.
I noticed also with this particular episode there was a background artist that commented in or tweeted about it on Twitter, saying like the artist who worked on it like worked so hard on this episode. And I think you can see that with like all the references that we talked about, and so much going on.
All the things in the collectors areas. To your point of Boimler's short speech about what Starfleet is about, I actually found that a very emotionally touching moment to see, because. Of two things. One is that's how I feel about the Federation and Star Trek, is that for me it's about the exploration and about the diplomacy, and it's not so much about the adventure. So it's like I have a part in Starfleet and Star Trek because of that speech in a way. And the other is I think it's an important moment where Boimler steps up for himself. He makes a public declaration to his superior officers that he's not going to fall in line, And there's I think it's a conversion moment in Boimler's character where he really begins to realize just what it is he wants in a very conscious way. And then the fact that that speech ends up saving the day because he remembers about Thomas Riker and does the transporter magic, and there it is. It helps. So I think that I think it was a special moment for Boimler's character, and I really loved it.
Mm. So Boimler himself ends up as a transported clone. What did you think about that?
So I'm not usually a big fan of the clone storylines like Thomas Riker or Tasha Yar goes in an alternate universe, goes back in time, stops the war, and then ends up having a Romulan child. Those kinds of storylines, I always have to raise an eyebrow. And it's basically, okay, they wanted an excuse to use this actor again or do something differently for them. Like Thomas Riker's return on DS9. They wanted Jonathan Frakes to show up on DS9, so they put Thomas instead of Will. That said, the moment when, near the very end, when Tendi and Rutherford have their exchange, and Rutherford says, "Oh, he got transporter clone, pay up." And Tendi's response is, "How did you know this would happen?" And Rutherford says, "Oh, it just seemed like a Boimler kind of thing to happen." And I sat there thinking, oh, damn it, he's right. It is a Boimler kind of thing to happen. And now I have to reevaluate how I feel about transporter clones. It is the kind of thing that would happen. So, yeah.
So I thought it was cool. I thought maybe it's like a sort of like non-committal way of the writers getting out of, like, shall we have Boimler on the Cerritos or on the Titan? But then also I liked how, like, it not only references TNG Second Chances, but also like that as early as like the anime within and the original series where Kirk is duplicated, or well, not so much duplicated in that case. His personality is split,
right?
Apparently,
yeah.
Two Kirks.
Well, there's such the tradition of transporter malfunctions. It's, even more used than holodeck malfunctions, and it's a storytelling device, and that works fine. And it helps to raise thoughts and also stoke fears about the nature of technology in general. Do we really understand what we're doing when we use a cell phone at a gas station? Well, yes, we do. It's harmless. We know that. That's established. But much of the world doesn't necessarily believe that, and that's fine. So it plays around with our own connection to our own technologies and our own sciences these days in interesting ways. But you said something that reminded me of something else, and I've forgotten it. That's all right.
Did you have any thoughts about like the last scene that featured Riker?
The last scene of what?
The last scene that features Riker.
I like that they made Riker so jazz obsessed in Lower Decks, and that his last words were "computer, play Nightbird." Like, it's great. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, and this partly because of the Riker, partly because of the Boimler split. It'll be interesting to see what happens to William Boimler, and if Riker takes him under his wing, as we're kind of led to believe might happen. In a sense, it's if the transporter clones are true clones, they're both exactly the same person. Is William Boimler, the new creation, is he like the one who will become the Will Riker, and our Bradward Boimler is the one who becomes like the Thomas Riker, the lesser than also ran of the Boimler clones? I found it an interesting notion of will we see William Boimler again eventually as second in command of the Titan or something like that?
I think that's interesting, especially given that what the plan was during the writing of TNG was basically to replace Will Riker with Tom Riker.
Was it really?
Yeah. Regarding Riker in this episode, I'd liked that you see like vinyl records on the wall of his red room. Again, like another sort of minute detail, but yeah, I just thought it was quite cool.
I like that Riker drinks Romulan ale, which one assumes is still contraband, and that we know that he helped Beckett Mariner get all of her contraband from the first season, but and that he has it sitting right there in public view is bold, and it's very Riker.
Then also, I've got like two notes. One was positive, and one was sort of less positive. I thought like Jet establishes like a great headcanon reason for mistaken looking number of pips on Starfleet uniforms. that's just like bits of corn. Yeah, and then
that
the
moment was like, you know when you watch Jeopardy and the there's a point to this, I promise. You watch Jeopardy and the answer comes up on the screen and you sit there and you think, I know this one. Wait, isn't that? No, it can't be. That's not right. And then the person says the answer and what they say was correct and it's also what you were thinking. That's the feeling that I got when he said it was street corn, because when we first see him with the two pips, I thought, wait, that separate pip, that's not quite right. It's shaped a little wrong. It's something, maybe that's not actually and it felt so good. I feel like they set it up for the audience to feel good about themselves.
And there's been like years of costume errors as well, like slight ones to do with like Tuvok wearing like the wrong number of pips when like I think on the early seasons, I think it's the first 2 seasons or something like that of Voyager. So yeah, this perfectly explains it.
Tuvok just walked around with corn on him all day long.
Faith asked, is it contraband though? Dominion war open trade with Romulans.
That's true. Well, so when Mariner in the first season, wow, that's a great question. Beckett Mariner in the first episode of the first season talks about the different bits of contraband she has. And among them is a blue liquid, and she offers Boimler some, and Boimler says, no, isn't that illegal? So I suspect it still is. But because the Dominion War was before all of this.
And so was like, I'm thinking of like Nemesis as well, where like it sort of like furthered ties with Romulans, like in diplomacy. Also, it crossed my mind about like Picard, but then Picard's set after this.
Right, 20-some odd years later, yeah.
And the final note I wrote about the episode of Lower Decks was I didn't much like the final scene with like Kayshon sort of being sleazy.
Oh, yeah, that final shot. Yeah,
I guess it's another. Sorry, I guess it's like another. I was thinking it's like another character aspect of Riker in a way, because he was like, he so often like flirt with women and stuff like that.
I don't know that I would say Kayshon was full on sleazy in a Riker way, though. I think he was trying a pickup line, and the language barrier got in his way. And I like the fact that he is able to not take that personally. That he'll keep going. One thing I did like about that scene, is in the background you can see Jet is chatting with another table, and so we know he's not left out on his own. That was, it's Kayshon is it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. Do you know if he's also voiced by Fred Tatasciore?
I'm not sure. I meant to look that up actually, and didn't get back to it. I thought Faith makes an interesting comment about the chronological placement of Lower Decks. But I was thinking about, like, where do you see Riker in both of them? Like in Lower Decks, he's in command of the Titan. In Picard, it's after that, clearly.
So yeah, they it's been addressed somewhere in a way that uh, it so Lower Decks was just a few years after the end of Voyager. There are references to Voyager and Voyager characters, so we know it has to be after that. But it's still very close to that period. Picard then still being 20 some odd years in the future. I'm really struggling too. You're not the only one. I don't remember. That we now have 3 shows all in different times, and the one that's furthest in the future has technology that's actually some of the oldest, and it's convoluted, and it'll be really interesting to see how they handle having 5 shows. I'm a little worried about that, but yeah. I was looking to see who.
Oh, who played Kayshon?
Yeah. There he is. There's the name. Nope, Carl Tart, a new name to me.
Same here. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, we talked last week about Tatasciore, and I hope I'm saying his name the way he says it, because I'm saying it the Italian way because I speak Italian. That his name is still in the opening credits, and here other characters. That's what I want. Admiral Vassery. I'm trying to. It's like, has he also played some of the central characters yet? And I don't see so. I wonder if they're planning on bringing him back then for another return character.
I think with the chronology, what I tend to get mixed up is not so much the the regular setting, the time setting of Star Trek Picard, because like I knew it was after, but like where the flashbacks in Star Trek Picard come in as well. And also I've seen some commentary online saying like, how come like the Cerritos and the Titan have like different Starfleet uniforms? And someone had replied to that in the case of like Deep Space Nine, when Deep Space Nine was introduced, and like the pilot episode Emissary, they had like different uniforms from like the Enterprise, but it seemed like someone had forgotten that like back also. Oh, because the answer to that was, but that was a different situation, because Deep Space Nine was a station and Enterprise was a ship. But they'd forgotten that, like in Discovery, you've got like the Enterprise and Discovery. They're both ships, but yet they've got 2 different styles of uniform. Or even in Generations, like on the Enterprise D, and they're wearing like both style, like the TNG and DS9 styles of uniforms at the same time on the same ship.
Right. Yeah, uniforms are funny. I think it was ridiculous that in the course of the what would it be, 7 plus 5, the 12 years from the beginning of Next Generation to the end of DS9, that Starfleet would have so many different redesigned costume aspects in a 12-year period. I pushed it into the chat here, a wonderful page on Wikipedia. Memory Alpha may have an equivalent, but I'm not familiar, I'm not familiar with it. That traces the timelines of a lot of the things. Now it is Wikipedia, so
sorry to interrupt, but you posted that in the wrong chat section. You posted it in private chat. If you post it in comments instead.
Oh, there we go. Oh, look, there's that. I don't
available.
have the ability to comment that there. When I switch, I don't have a thing there.
Oh, right. You can see it on the Facebook page for the Scotch Tracker.
Okay. Yeah, in case there's a Wikipedia page called Timeline of Star Trek, which places everything from the beginning of before the birth of the universe, which we see a bit of in Death Wish, and it keeps going, so you can see how each series flows with real-time chronology, and it's really impressive. I've thought about doing a similar thing. What I wanted to do is you're talking about chronologies. I've wanted to trace you're talking about flashbacks, rather. I wanted to put all flashbacks into a pseudo chronology so as to watch the whole show, everything in exact strict timeliness. So if there's a 5-second flashback, then I'd have to flip back and forth from one season to a series or show to the next. But my wife told me that was insanity, and she's right, so I won't do it. But I did have the thought, and it was a wonderful one, and I hope someone out there takes it up.
Okay, I posted the link in the chat.
That's it.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good page on Wikipedia. I've used it quite a lot, and like basically when I've been watching Discovery, I've started doing like that, like for the flashbacks and stuff like that. Because I noticed in the second season, like there's flash forwards to like a parallel universe and stuff like that. It's like the timeline goes all over the place, basically. To an extent, and regarding timelines and stuff like that, we'll be talking about a series that's set relatively early. I think it must be the earliest set Star Trek show, which is Star Trek Enterprise. Tomorrow we'll be discussing it. So join us then. Thanks very much for watching today in the review of Lower Decks episodes. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow to discuss Enterprise. Please like and subscribe to the video, and track you later. And thanks for joining the discussion, Gary.
My pleasure. Thanks.